British guns at Alamein thundered their way into the fourth year of war and the first year of victory. The long uphill struggle of defensive warfare was done with. The legend of German invincibility finally smashed. From now on, the Allied armies were on the march forward. In those last months of 1942, the veteran 8th Army fired the imagination of the civilized world. The desert rats became figures almost of legend, just as 2 years before, the young flyers of the RAF in the Battle of Britain symbolized for the expectant world the triumph of right over might. Then came the electrifying news of the British and American landings in North Africa. For the first time, an Allied invasion force had attacked German-controlled territory. The greatest armada in history put them ashore, these fighting men of the great democracies. The first step had been taken towards the opening and eventual clearing of the Mediterranean for the unhindered passage of Allied supply ships. With the capture of Algiers, the fate of Rommel's North African armies was sealed. Meanwhile, the RAF and Allied air forces had beaten the Axis Air Force out of the sky. They'd wrested from the Luftwaffe their boasted air supremacy. And from then on, it was the Allied flyers who paved a bomb-shattered way for our advancing armies. Bombs over Benghazi. Within a few days, the advance guard of the 8th Army had taken over the capital city of Cyrenaica. Those were the guns of Stalingrad. The 12th of December is graven deep in Russian hearts, for on that day, the greatest siege the world has ever known was lifted. At Stalingrad, the Germans suffered the heaviest defeat of their long and bloody military history, and the word Stalingrad became synonymous with courage and endurance of almost superhuman quality. The surrender of von Paulus, the German commander, no less than 24 other Axis generals surrendered with him, together with 22 divisions of the German army. Meanwhile, Montgomery and his 8th Army were pushing steadily westwards towards Tripoli. The capital city fell on the 23rd of January 1943, and with the entrance of the 8th Army men into Tripoli, the last tottering fabric of Mussolini's fascist empire overseas dissolved like mist in the morning sun. The Casablanca meeting between Churchill, Roosevelt, and the French leaders marked the beginning of the offensive phase of the United Nations against Europe itself. Down in the Pacific, too, the character of the war was changing. No longer were the Japanese undisputed masters of the sea and air. In the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, Japan suffered a bitter blow to her pride and to her naval strength. The Americans and Australians destroyed an entire convoy of 22 ships. On May the 7th, men of the 1st and 8th Armies entered Tunis. They were enthusiastically received by the civilian population. For Rommel, it was the writing on the wall. That same day, the 7th of May, the Americans took over the heavily fortified naval base at Bizerta. 7 days later, we were masters of the North African shores. Prelude to invasion. The first blow was struck against Axis Europe when Pantelleria fell. "24 days of air assault by British and American bombers, followed by a visit from the Royal Navy, and this stepping stone to Sicily submitted to the Allies. Yes, the new aggressive spirit of the Allied land forces was beginning to show real dividends in the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and deep inside Europe, the German people were beginning to know fear, were seeing at last within their own backyards something of the real horrors of war. Their war that they had deliberately loosed on the world. Night after night, the great aircraft of RAF Bomber Command spread their wings over Germany. Week by week, the shadow of those wings lengthened until the night of May the 17th, a black night indeed for Germany. Dawn revealed great breaches in the towering Möhne and Eder dams, breaches through which the floodwaters poured into the devastated Ruhr Valley, a severe blow to German war production. King George VI put the seal on Allied control of the Mediterranean when he paid a personal call on his fighting men of the 1st and 8th Armies. Malta, triumphant veteran of 2 years' siege, gave ample expression to its approval of the man who had awarded the island the coveted George Cross. Britain's former defensive outpost had now become an offensive base on the road to Italian capitulation. The first 3 years of the war had brought an ever-mounting toll of U-boat victims. The bottom of the Atlantic was littered with the shattered hulks of Allied supply ships. Then, on the last day of June, Mr. Churchill revealed what he called the total defeat of a great U-boat attack on an important convoy. The Battle of the Atlantic had turned in favor of the Allies. The soft underbelly of the Axis now lay exposed. On the 10th day of July, we struck against Sicily. Allied sea and air control over the Mediterranean was complete. The Axis Navy and Air Forces proved powerless to prevent the landings. On the 39th day after the first landings, the Axis stronghold of Sicily passed into Allied control. Backed now by United States fighting men and materials, British resilience and efficiency, after 3 anxious years in the doldrums, were at last beginning to assert themselves, and in no uncertain fashion. First North Africa, then Sicily, and now, as the war slips into its 5th year, Hitler has to swallow the bitter pill of knowing that the initiative has been wrested from his grasp forever. On the 25th day of July came the news of Mussolini's downfall, first of the 3 founders of the unholy Axis alliance. And to mark the 5th year of war, our great Soviet ally is still bearing the enormous weight of the main German military machine. More than this, the Red Army has confounded Hitler's generals by staging a successful summer offensive. Orel, Kursk, and now Kharkov captured, and the Germans driven back to the very gateway of the Caucasus, which for 2 years they have bled their manhood and their factories to hold. This may truly be called a year of victory.